So let's bring up Mr. Eric Wallace. Thank you, thank you. Wherever you like. I mean, if you don't like me that much, you can still. All right, so today we're going to talk about a number of things of Mr. Wallace's work. He's done a lot of things, including live action television. He has written comic books. He's currently buying comic books now. For your own show? That's a little.
It's Spider-Man and Black Panther. Come on, man. I got this for $3 right there.
$3?
Man, that's like the bargain of the
That retailer looks like he knows what he's doing.
Yeah. Go visit that dude. Buy some comics.
All right. Eric has also worked on feature films, which is whoa, you know, and audio dramas and television. We'll have some time for questions and answers. So that's the general modus operandi here that we're going to work with. So first of all, we're going to start out talking about his television work. My first question, because you work on the Flash, is very important to me. How did Cisco get his conditioner game so tight? How does he do that? Because when he whipped that out on it, I mean, I was like, oh, you know what, Cisco, you really have that?
That's a great question. We all love Carlos's hair because we all love Cisco so much. And it is kind of a running gag on the set and with the writers and with the producers and with the crew of how awesome his hair is, and it's got to be perfect in every shot. And he's the nicest guy ever, too. So as far as I got to give it up to our makeup people, we have such a great cast and crew and showrunner and writer and everybody who makes The Flash what you guys see every Tuesday night at 8. It really is a labor of love.
All right. I want to ask you in particular about the tone of the show, because especially coming after the success of Arrow, which was super gritty, The Flash is really primary colors and really bright and really lively. Could you talk to us about how you maintain and set that tone for the show as both a writer and a producer, and how that's an intentional choice?
Yeah, the tone of The Flash is designed for families. I have a 9-year-old daughter, and it is designed for folks to be able to watch it together. Parents, kids, it's all ages. And we talk about this all the time in the writer's room as we're discussing stories, as we're breaking larger arcs, because we have sometimes some scary villains, like Reverse Flash can get a little intense. And yeah, it was vibrating his hand, and that's one of my favorite episodes out of time. Yeah, 115, I love that one. Yeah, I'm a super nerd, by the way. And I will get a little deep, and you can stop.
Oh, we will. Oh, no, we're going deep today.
But we are very conscious that what would be too intense for someone who's very young. A lot of my friends, they all have their kids too, and some of them are even as young as 6, 7, and 8. And I know that they're watching, so when I'm in the room, especially if one of the younger writers will pick something, you know, too violent, too intense, we'll save that for Aaron. Yeah, because we really do want the kind of program that can travel far and that, you know, parents can enjoy with their kids.
You bring up an interesting question. You said save that for Arrow. Is there that kind of collaboration between crews, between creative communities there? So it's like, yo, I got this great idea for you guys, and you can send it over to them, and vice versa?
Well, we're all together. All the staffs for Arrow, Supergirl, Flash, Legends of Tomorrow, we're all kind of in the same area. So, you know, you'll be walking down the hallway, and I'll see one of my buddies on Arrow, and I'll go, hey, bro, what's up? We had that Arrow last night. Woo, that was intense. And they'll go, oh, Flash was funny last night. And you high five, and you go to the bathroom, and you go get a cup of coffee. So we are not super close, but we do have these close moments where we can engage. But as far as what you're talking about with story, when the crossovers come along once a year, hopefully you guys enjoyed it this past year when Barry and Iris finally got married, and yes, crazy people in black did show up who were weird doppelgangers. That's where you see the real collaboration between the two staffs, between the showrunners from all 4 shows, and they do sit down quite far in advance to really work things out, to pitch the ideas, and it is an all-hands-on-deck kind of thing. They're very intense, they're very hard to write, they're extremely hard to produce, because we're really doing a feature film in 4 parts. So it pushes the crew, the cast, the producing staff. It pushes everybody to the limit, but it's really worth it when it's done. I was really happy with the way this year's Crisis on Earth X turned out. So hopefully you guys liked it too.
And even we had that animated spinoff with the Ray that turned out really well.
Yes, I love the Ray. Love the Ray. You know, inclusivity and the whole nine yards. I think it's wonderful. Anytime we can show not just the characters that we're used to, because let's face it, the Flash is a white guy. Let's not beat around the bush. Yes, you know. One of the things I love about being on that show is it's an interracial romance. I love Iris, I love Joe, I love Cecile, I like writing for black folks so much. In a context that is just, this is a superhero show. We're just as smart as everyone else in the world. I love this woman in her Iron Man costume over here, because Iron Man's a black woman now. How awesome is that?
When you get to town, ask her her name later, it's going to blow your wig back.
Oh, okay. When I was growing up, and I was reading comic books, and I started reading at 4 or 5. I mean, there wasn't anything really for me. It's probably why I love horror movies so much. The only thing I really had as a kid, believe it or not, was George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead, which have black male leads in them, very strong black male leads. And I just bonded and identified with that as a kid so much. And that was my gateway drug to horror movies. And
we'll catch up with that when we talk about audio dramas, because I do want to ask you about that. About the cast. So you have such a widely varied group of actors. Some are very serious, some are very funny, some have different skills. How do you, when you approach, say, for instance, okay, I need to write something for Cisco, or versus I need to write something for, say, Caitlin, or I need to write something for Joe. How do you get into those different voices as a writer, as a creative person? And how do you help manage the process of making sure that stays consistent throughout the series?
I do wear a dress when writing the women. No, I'm kidding.
Not that there's anything wrong with it.
Not that there's anything wrong with it. You don't know what I wear.
I respect your privacy.
Yeah, I'm a little odd at times, sorry. But it's a great question. All the writers on the Flash staff, even when you have a character you love, like for instance, I really like some of the specific villains that we have on the show, Reverse Flash, Captain Cold, crazy folks like that. So I really like to dig deep into their mindset and write those kinds of characters. But I also love writing a Joe speech. I love when Joe sits down with Barry, and just as a father, because I'm a father too, so I pull a lot from my own life and talking to my own daughter, I put it right in Joe's mouth and have him talk to his son too. But as far as maintaining consistency of all the characters, it's just something as a writer that we all help each other with. There's black people in our writer's room. There's Hispanic people in our writer's room. There are men. There are women. We try to get a mixed writing staff so that we can write the experiences of all different kinds of people. So if I get stuck in a corner and I'm trying to write, say for instance, I'm trying to write a Harry speech. And
I was going to ask you about that, but go on.
I do love writing Tom Cavanaugh dialogue because he's the funniest guy ever. And you don't have to hold back at all. He will take your words, no matter how far out and overly intellectual they seem, and he'll just make it sound natural. So I specifically like writing for Tom Cavanaugh. I do love writing for Iris so much, especially, there's an episode Tuesday night, in fact, this Tuesday, where Iris, I'm sure you've seen the ads, Iris gets speed powers.
What up, dude? What's up? Good to see you. Brandon Easton right there, right, Brandon.
The comic creator.
He's got a panel. What time is your panel, Brandon?
1
o'clock.
o'clock.
Whole bunch of TV writers writing on that one at 1 o'clock with Brandon Easton.
Stick around for that, man. He's awesome. But, what was I saying? Iris. There's a show Tuesday night called Run Iris Run, in which Iris gets speed powers. And I gotta be honest with you, when we pitched it, we put it on the board, I was secretly hoping the whole time, please God, let me get this one. Please let me get this one. I want to write the you-know-what out of this. Because I like the character, and I like science fiction and crazy speed so much. And in writing it, what was so exciting, and you'll see Tuesday night, I'm not getting any spoilers, but there's a journey that Iris has been on for, I think, 4 years. And we're going to see a turn in the road, but I think it's pretty interesting. It was really great to kind of dig into that, but there was a moment there where I'm writing a woman, And I wanted some insight into that, and I went to our female writers on the staff and I said, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think of that dialogue coming out of Iris's mouth? And sometimes the women in the room will go, dude, don't you write that. I will beat your butt if you put that in Iris's mouth. And I'm like, yes, ma'am. You know, you want to listen to your fellow writers because we're all collaborating. We're all kind of all in it together. You know, my name's on it, but there's a whole bunch of people working together. And then there's, of course, Candace herself, who I love, who just turns in, I think, one of her best performances. So that's what it's like.
Okay. I want to, because there's so much I love about The Flash. There's been so many different types of roles for Tom Cavanaugh. He's played a villain, he's played a hero, he's played a collaborator, he's played a father, he's played, you know, so he's played a wizard. I mean, he's done
Wells the Gray is my favorite. I'm saying it right here. Huzzah!
So, how, I mean, but they're all the same character. The consistency of the character, you can see it through whatever the incarnation, even when it's gone.
Yes, Hannibal.
how,
I'm sorry, I could resist. I've known this guy for way too long.
How does that process work? I mean, because I have a hard time keeping like, okay, I know this is the same guy I've been writing for the last year, but what the heck is he supposed to talk about? How do you change so many Wells? How many in the same, consistent Tom Cavanaugh actor?
Well, Tom Cavanaugh, who's a great director, by the way. I don't know if you guys recall, this year he directed for us again, episode 404 with The Elongated Man. And the reason we keep bringing him back as a director is because he's so talented and so versatile. So at the beginning of the season, we will sit down and we will say, hey, we're thinking of this different idea for a Wells this season. What do you think? And he will give us input, and we'll work together to kind of create something new. This season we saw the Council of Wells, which was a whole new series of performances for Tom to kind of come up with. So, you know, we wrote, Matthew McConaughey, essentially Wells, even though it's kind of a Hugh Hefner playboy, he's clearly channeling
Evil Robot Wells.
Evil Robot Wells, who's from Australia, but in the dark world. Why not? And of course, I speak German, so I was very emphatic. Hey, let's get a German Wells too. Let's have him speak German. Let's be an uber intellectual, and let's have some fun. So we'll come up with those. We'll bounce them off Tom. Tom will bring his own unique input and interpretation to them. And as we're writing the dialogue, it works together and kind of comes alive. Also in the stories themselves. So we love the Council of Wells. We love them.
There's so much I can ask about The Flash. I gotta keep moving. You talked a little about staying in sync with the other shows. Is when you get to the big annual crossover, is it like the way like a lot of nerds feel about San Diego? It's like, yay, we're all together. You know, it's like nerdy gras essentially. Is it a celebratory feeling every year?
Yes, it is. The crossovers, even though they're extremely hard to write and extremely hard, it's just hard to get all those characters from their own shows crossing over and being in different places at the same time, while we're also trying to write the individual storylines for all 4 shows. So there's a lot of juggling, and I really say this is where our producer, our big producer up in Canada, JP Finn, who is the guy who does the bolts, the nuts and bolts, and the actual coordinating with his team. This is where they shine the most. We can write, and 1,000 Wells, go to Earth 3 and attack 1,000 Supergirls, and then Dark Supergirls do a conga to the left. We can write that, but someone actually has to bring it to life, and that's our production staff and our directors, and they just do such an amazing job. But it is like kids in a candy store at crossover time. I won't tell an untruth here. It's fantastic.
I love it. Okay, I got to move on to some of this because there's so much that you've done. I want to talk about Teen Wolf briefly. So Teen Wolf, when it came to MTV, was a very different direction from the cinematic approach. It was darker, it was edgier, it was not a comedy. Could you talk to us about how that choice was made and how that affected the writing and the work that you did on the show?
I'll tell you a funny story about how I got the job, which answers this. I love horror movies. As I said, I was a Georgia Romero fan as a kid, and I'd come off of Eureka and Z Nation, and was here looking for the next gig. And I told my representatives, I just want to do genre. I don't want to work on Grey's Anatomy. I love Grey's Anatomy. I really do. I've been watching it since day one, but it's not doesn't call to me as an artist and as a creative entity. So I said, look out for horror shows. And then I was a fan of Teen Wolf from day one anyways. I went into the interview because there was a spot open, and the creator of the show had already decided this is going to be a grounded, more horrific take where teenagers are dealing with today's problems in a very diverse way. Again, black people, gay people, women, Hispanic, the whole 9 yards. I was so proud when we introduced the first kind of black male gay character onto that show. Now, I'm not gay, but I wrote that crap out of that character. I was so happy, you know. I could talk to my black male gay friends and black women friends who are also lesbian, like bring it all in and say, look, you've got a face here. You have stories too, and they take place in a world where there's werewolves and zombies and vampires, and it's okay. It's okay. So I deliberately chose that show, and the guy in the interview who was the showrunner said, well, what do you really want to do? And I said, I just want to write horror. Really grounded, well-made horror. And he's like, yeah, you're the right guy. And it was just a blast for all those years. We had such a great cast on that show, and we were a very kind of visually driven show. It's a very visually aggressive show in the art direction, in the camera work. We were all kind of horror movie geeks on the show. So in between shots, you're talking to Dylan O'Brien and Tyler Posey and all the gang, and we're having this great time. And then I would go from them, and I would go over to the camera crew, and we'd start talking about Alien, The Shining, Dawn of the Dead, Night of the Living Dead, you know, whatever, The Ring and all that stuff. And we always challenged ourselves on the set every day. How can we today do as good work as Stanley Kubrick did The Shining, or Ridley Scott did an Alien, or name whatever, you know, The Conjuring of movies with what he's like nowadays, James Wan, which is a great director. How can we, on a third of the money and a third of the time and a third of the resources, because it's about your passion and your inspiration, how can we do that today on Teen Wolf? And I think that's hopefully what came through to the audiences and why they're so, you know, connected to the show.
Yeah, it did have a very strong fan base. I also want to ask you though, because if you're dealing with teenagers who are addressing horror themes, you know, there's got to be some distance from a little town called Sunnyvale, because Buffy kind of told a lot about that story. How did you approach not tripping into those tropes and finding your own path in that regard?
Well, as the world's biggest Buffy and Angel fan, I am fully qualified to answer that.
Several people will fight you for that.
That's I don't know. Although I like Angel more than Buffy. Is that okay?
Me too.
Is that okay in this room?
What are they gonna do? You up here?
Yeah, I just love them both. I consider them the same show. Anyways, there was always a mandate because the showrunner and creator of Teen Wolf said, don't watch any more Buffy. Don't watch any more Angels. Just stay away from it. Get it out of your brain. We want to do something completely different. Now, I think the key was Buffy's really funny. It's hilarious. Now, Teen Wolf had moments of humor in the writing, without question, especially Dylan O'Brien, who was a very gifted, believe it or not, very gifted comedic actor. Very funny guy. But the mandate was try to scare the you-know-what out of everybody. And also, it was very much a romance. And whereas Buffy was a romance between a man and a woman, you know, Angel and Buffy, especially in those first 3 seasons, Teen Wolf was a bromance. It was the love and the friendship between 2 guys, between Tyler Posey and Dylan O'Brien. And so that, at its core, was the difference between the 2 shows. It was always not a sexual thing, obviously, but it was a deep love and friendship, and we called it a bromance every day on staff, talking about those 2 characters. And that's, I think, where the difference is. That's the most fundamental difference between the 2 shows. And that's why I think it kind of stands separately from Buffy, even though I love Buffy and Angel.
As you should.
Yeah, sure.
When you're developing characters, when you're looking at, there's a teenager who is a lycanthrope, who develops these powers and who has these challenges, what, you know, that's not something that you can sit at the mall and watch kids do, burst in their fur. How do you get into the psychology of those characters as a writer, because as you say, you want to scare people, but where does that come from in your creative process?
You always think, when you're writing genre and science fiction, always think about the truth of what you're going through in your own life. The science fiction, the fantasy, and the horror is only a metaphor for what we're feeling as people. So it's what am I scared of just as a person? You know, I'm scared of unemployment. I'm scared of, you know, my family getting hurt. I'm scared of war. I'm scared of crazy presidents, you know, things like that. Now I say to the writers' room, okay, those are what our actual fears are. How do we turn those into supernatural things? So in the last season of CSULA, especially in our final season, which was 6B, the villain, which was the Anukate, was a creature of fear. And literally, he was taking everybody in the town, taking their fear of, quite frankly, xenophobia, and making it kind of a supernatural version of it. And that informs the writing. So it always comes from truth, from your real own fears and your real own experiences, and then you put a vampire or a werewolf or a mummy or an Anukate on top.
Okay. I have to move on to Eureka because it had Sally Richardson, who, like, after I would follow her anyway. But there was so much chemistry between the leads on that show. And when you're writing that kind of romantic tension, do you also pull from your own existence, or do you use some of what's happening with the actors therein more so?
A little bit of both. In writing the two characters that Sally and Colin would play, first of all, you have great actors. So half of my job is done. I just got to write some words down. This is amazing. I love actors, and I love working with them both as a writer and as a director. But with Sally and Colin playing their two characters, really it was drawing on our own relationships, people on the staff who were in relationships, who were married, who had kids, who were in interracial romances also, like Sally and Jack are, and bringing just the truth of what we experience in our own lives, put it on paper. And then when you go to set, it takes on a new life, because as a producer and as a writer, you're on set, you're talking to the actors, you're talking to the director, and you're even working on another level to find that moment, find that line, find that look that brings the truth out even more. And sometimes you may change the lines right on set. You may work with the director or work with the actor to make it even more real. And so we spend a lot of time doing that too. And if you have two actors like Sally and Colin who are willing to have fun, then magic happens, and we get lucky. We get Eureka.
I love it. Okay. The next question is going to segue into our next slide, but there were a lot of super smart characters on Eureka. Almost everybody had a doctorate except this guy. How do you write characters who sometimes have greater educational levels than you, greater mental processing skills than you, and how do you make them and their lives relatable at that rarefied era of their intellect?
Wikipedia? I'm not joking. But it's funny you should mention this. We had the same problem writing The Thinker on The Flash this season. A person who's so intelligent and a talented geniuses like you have in Eureka, you do a lot of research, quite frankly. I found myself subscribing to Scientific American and all these other science magazines and bookmark every single NASA site, every website on science, and you have to submerge yourself in the research and in the world to where it becomes second nature to you. And then when you go to write the dialogue, you're pulling from the things you've learned. And you might get some Wikipedia quotes too.
I could do a whole panel on just you and TV, but we have to move on because there's so many other things that you've done. Leading into your comic book work, and that's where the super smart character, and you worked with Michael Holt and you developed him into an adventurer on a level that had not been seen in my knowledge of the character in comics. I think he was the third smartest man in the world, was he? Whatever you call him?
Well, it's funny, in the book, he's identified as the third smartest man in the world. So the question was always, who are the first two, which I will not reveal because DC won't let me. But I always felt when I was writing it, it was a joke. If I'm the smartest man in the world, I don't tell everybody I'm the smartest man in the world. I tell them I'm third. So they don't come after me. They come after the people who think they're number one and number two, and I just watch and observe and I learn. That's smart. Exactly, it's smart. So that to me was the joke of Mr. Terrific. I always wrote him as the smartest man in the world. And the 1 and 2 who thought they were 1 and 2, that's just a joke. Those guys, they're right. And the same process was used writing Mr. Terrific. Tons and tons of scientific research. It helped that I was working on Eureka during the day as a TV writer and writing Mr. Terrific as a comic book writer at night at the same time, because there was a lot of cross-pollination of research. It was a really busy time.
Yeah, but a good time.
Good time.
When you're working, creating both heroes and villains, how do you differentiate? Because as we saw in the recent billion-dollar movie Black Panther, there's a very thin line between what some people would consider a hero or a villain. How do you make that differentiation in your work so when it comes out that happens, or do you blur the line as well?
You should always blur the line between your heroes and your villains. The villain doesn't think he or she is the villain in their story. To use Black Panther, Killmonger doesn't think he's a villain, and quite frankly, neither do I.
He made some good points.
Let's face it, I think that's why people are responding. First of all, the movie's just awesome. Let's just get that out of the way. But I think that's what people are responding to in that character. It's the same thing when we write The Thinker and the Flash, when we write the Anukate and Teen Wolf, when you write Brainstorm in the Mr. Terrific comics. Anything you write, the villain always has to believe that what they're doing is right. And if the audience kind of starts to agree, then you know you're on to something. And now it's much harder for the hero. How does the hero go up against someone who kind of has a good point? It's tougher. You can't just kill him or her because you can't kill their ideology, because their ideology is relevant. That's, I think, where you get good superhero drama.
Okay, that's great. I have to skip around a little here because I want to make sure we get your time. Could you talk to me about the difference in how you work with comic book collaborators versus television collaborators? Because those are very different types of work streams.
They are. Working in comic books, you're working with just only two people, really. Your artist, of course, and your editor. And I like to call the artist up as soon as we get the job and establish communication. Establish an open door and say, this is what I'm planning for the next 12 issues, but what do you think? What are your ideas visually? Because the thing I love about writing comic books is I'll write a very wordy script. Big surprise, I'm a very wordy guy.
No.
Yes. And so I'll write a whole bunch of stuff, and as I get the proofs matched with the art, I will look at the proofs before they are actually printed, and I will say to myself, where has the artist done such a great job that I can cut out some words? And it's fantastic. That's when you know me and the artist we're like in sync. So that's I guess is how you work with comic books, which is very different from working in a writer's room on Flash or Eureka or Teen Wolf or whatever it is, because now it's 10 people in a room. It's not just me and an artist, and everybody's intelligent, smart, coming from diverse backgrounds. And everybody has something really relevant to say. So your most important skill in a writer's room is listening. You gotta listen, because something wonderful will come from this group mind. I think that's what you see in television shows. You're responding to something that's been vetted by 10 really different, smart, diverse people, but passionate people. That make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. When you were writing, comics are normally divided into writing full script, which is every possible thing you describe in the panel, or what's called the Marvel method, where you just kind of say, this happens on this page, this happens on this page, and go fill in dialogue later. Have you worked in both, and do you have a preference?
I'm a control freak. Big surprise. The Marvel way is fine. I love their comic books. I work the opposite. When you get a script of mine, it will have every single thing in every panel described in detail. In fact, I will incorporate JPEGs and pictures into my scripts to show the artist, this is what I'm thinking of. This building in France could be the building that Michael Holt and Mr. Terrific kind of lives in, but make it more sci-fi. Obviously, I don't want to be a dictator, because I want to collaborate too. But I'll try to add as much detail as I can to give the artist as much help as I can, because then they can take it that much further faster, because we're on deadlines. That's another thing. That's very important. The deadlines in comic books, oh man, you got 3 months from, I think I got this idea, to here's the book, Hannibal. That's not enough time to get stuff done, so you've got to move like wildfire.
Absolutely. Talking about time in that regard, in terms of pacing and structure, comics are also a very ruthless market where you don't have very long to catch the audience. You may have a different investment in terms of television, in terms of, I can save this character's arc until a little down the line. how do you work with the structure of, like, it's 20 or 22 pages of a comic? How do you work with structuring that in terms of pacing stories so you can get the points out and still develop the character, but, you know, capture people as quickly as possible?
It's really tough writing comic books which are 22 pages and you're trying to tell a complete story. When I was growing up writing comic book stories were single issues. So you could go to the store, I'd buy Spider-Man or Captain Marvel or Batman or whatever it was, and it was a self-contained story in 22 pages. Nowadays, everything is geared towards the graphic novel market. So every story in a comic book, there are no single issue stories. It's very rare. Everything's a 4-parter or a 6-parter, so it can then be sold as a graphic novel, which I love. Because I love reading my graphic novels. But what that means is you're not putting as much story in a comic book individual issue as you would have in the past. So it affects your pacing now. It's a more visual thing. It's less wordy. Although Marvel, like Brian Bendis, fantastic writer, love him. Although he's a Marvel man.
He switched over.
Yeah, he switched over. Wow, I can't believe that. That's amazing. Bendis is very wordy, like me, very heavy with his panels. So that's kind of an exception to the rule, but most of the time you're telling a simple story in comic book, and then you kind of arc it out over your 4 issues. You say issues 1 and 2 are the beginning, issues 3 and 4 are the middle, issue 5 is a transitory one where something truly horrible happens, and then I got to wrap it all up in 6. So you really have to kind of plan your page count much more so, I think, than the old days when you could tell a very dense whole story in an issue. And if you had a 2-part story in an old comic book, like when I was a kid, Amazing Spider-Man 121 and 122.
Yes, sir.
Death of Gwen Stacy. My prized possession comic books in my collection at home, which I still have. In pretty decent condition, actually. But that was a really big 2-part story. When you read it, you can see how much story they're trying to tell in just those 2 issues. It's moving like wildfire because they're really trying to fit a lot of stuff in. You may not see that much in today's comic book unless it's a Bendis, who's kind of a master of that.
Yep. So, quick yes or no question. More comics to come?
Yes, eventually, yes.
Okay, good. Let's move on to feature films. You were working on a project called Bloody Mary that ended up in, as they call it, development hell. It didn't exactly make it all the way out. What would we have seen in Bloody Mary? What would we have seen?
Well, I'll tell you, Bloody Mary was my first feature film sale when I was a very young man,
So 2 or 3 weeks ago?
Yeah, 2 weeks ago. And what was really interesting is it was a story that was about a hip-hop vampire, Bloody Mary. Ooh, original. But you get the idea. But what I decided to do was tell it in the style of The Godfather Part 2. So like in The Godfather Part 2, you know, there's 2 timelines that alternate between the past and the present. The past storyline is her as a slave on a plantation in Atlanta, and she's brought in for food by the vampire kind of master. And you're gradually learning how she became a vampire. Meanwhile, you're cutting to the present, where she's Mary J. Blige, who is the person that we wanted to play the part at the time. And she's at the top of her game, and no one knows why she's never seen anymore. When she left at the top of her game, it turns out she's a vampire, and kind of a baby-face character, because this was 10, 15 years ago, was the person who was going to, we tried to get for that role. Exposes it, they fight bad guys, etc., etc. It was very ambitious, and it sold. The company it sold to loved it, and we're going to make it. But of course, what development hell is now we have to go look for financing. This was a time where the only black, I think, really successful superhero was Blade, which was the late 90s. It was a very, very tough sell for this kind of a film. So it got lost in the shuffle. And there were times where people were like, well, you know, it's about hip hop, but it's so urban, and all those words that they use, right, which means it's too black. Can't we soften it up a little bit and make it more mainstream? What if she's a pop star? Then the next thing that happens is, well, what if she's white instead of black? Oh, come on, dude. That all of those kinds of things that happen can crush a project, and you kind of beat your head against the wall, and then we found some more financiers, and it looked like we were going to do. It looked like Master P was going to be involved for a while there in financing for his kind of low-budget horror division that he was trying to create in like the early 2000s, and it's the same thing. Oh, I love that dress. It's sort of a BB-8 dress. Yes, that's, I have a little BB-8 at home that rolls around the floor. It's so geeky, gosh. But it's one of those things where you struggle, and you try to maintain your artistic vision, and at some point, either the rubber hits the road or disaster strikes. And at this point, it just disaster struck. Everyone decided, this is too risky of a movie to make, it's too strange. Slavery, vampires, hip-hop, and so the project dies. And the problem with something in development is, because you're thinking, well, Eric, just get the script back, you'll make it yourself. I would love to do that even 10, 15 years later. I no longer own the script because it was bought by someone else. That's the real pain of putting something in development. Unless you buy it back, it's someone else's. And the same story I could describe on 3 movies that I got very close with. And you know, I worked as a script doctor and working on other people's material and pumping up their scripts. And it's great practice, and it's a great way to earn your living and get your chops up and whatnot. And got very close on Hellblazer, actually. Yeah, with it. And eventually it got made, but with a different studio. You know, Constantine. Oh, that's a sad story. Those are good parts. Moving on.
Have you ever taken any of the ideas that were in the script and ended up repurposing them, finding characters or themes or dialogues pop up in other places or the project?
Only one thing, which is kind of the nature of vampirism itself. Like, I kind of look at vampirism as coming from blood, and so it's my idea that the blood is a living, sentient being and can breathe and live and run away and go into someone else. So that sneaks into other things that I write a lot of times. If you see biological functions that suddenly have sentience and that are alive and that move and that can create and move from person to person, that's what I'm stealing from my own work.
Go back frame by frame and look for that.
Yes.
Do you consider this more of a regret or a learning experience?
Oh, learning experience. I don't try to dwell on regrets. That's not good. It's not healthy.
I agree.
It's like a shark. Move forward, right? Every project, it lives in its own time, and maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. That's okay. You keep writing, you keep producing, you keep directing, you keep making better and better material. So I take all the lessons from that script, and I put it into the 10 scripts that came after it. I put it into The Flash, I put it into Mr. Terrific, I put it into the stuff I'm working on now. Hopefully that comes out 3 years from now.
Okay. All right. We've already answered the last question. Let's move on to audio dramas. Now, I know that you love Dark Shadows.
God, I love Dark Shadows.
You love Dark Shadows a lot. It's almost kind of creepy. But a lot of people don't know what Dark Shadows is. So for the uninitiated, could you tell them, give them a taste of your passion and why Dark Shadows is so great?
Okay, so when I was a kid, again, there were no role models, there was nothing to look, not living dead, or 9 yards. There was one thing on television in the late 60s, early 70s, and they reran it in the 70s and early 80s, which is when I caught it, right? And it was this soap opera called Dark Shadows. Yes, I said the word soap opera. Yep. And I'm not I know, man. It's crazy. So I'm watching my local public television station, and I come across this crazy show with a vampire biting someone on just right in the middle of the show. And I'm like, what is this? This is the craziest thing I've ever seen. And so I did a little research and found the books, right? And it turns out this is a soap opera that ran for only 5 years in the late 60s and early 70s. And every day at 3:30, Monday through Friday, kids from that generation, like the first generation of geeks, they would all run home, watch this crazy vampire show, which had werewolves, Egyptian mummies, phoenixes, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which had every monster. That's all there was for these kids, this whole generation. And that was their kind of geek celebration. Well, I fell in love with it. This was in high school. And when I got the opportunity, 25 years later, they were bringing back Dark Shadows with the original cast. They needed new writers to make a series of plays or audio dramas, which you can go on audible.com and check it out. That's Wicked and They're Dead, the one you're seeing the cover there. It's my favorite one, which is about 2 dudes ghosts, and an exorcism. Yeah, that's me. But it was just exciting because I got to meet my heroes from childhood. I actually got to work with them, write for them, and be in the studio as the director was actually making the performances happen. It was really full circle because Dark Shadows is how I learned to write dialogue in high school. Just watching soap operas, and I recorded them on cassette tapes. That's all it was back then. And at night, when I would go to bed, I would put the cassette player by my bed and I'd just hit play, and I would just fall asleep listening to dialogue. And my brain's weird, though. And that's how I learned the rhythm of language. Because that's all I had back then. And I still have those audio cassettes, about 50 of them.
Nice. Could you talk about the differences of writing for audio drama? Because you have to set the scene and you have to...
You lost your mic. You use mine.
That's why I have a duplicate. So, could you talk about making, what the differences are, what you're doing there, and how you develop that sort of thing?
Yeah, writing for audio dramas, it's like writing for a play, but you can't see anything. So, there's an audio drama, it's not pictured here, but it's called the Lucifer Gambit. And what I wanted to do is take advantage of the fact that the people would be listening to it in the dark, maybe with a glass of wine, just getting into it. So the villain of the piece is a monster that can only attack you in the dark, right? Yeah, so you use the medium that you're in to tell the strongest story. And I was like, well, no one can see this play. They're just going to be putting a CD or a digital download in. What's the way to take advantage of that? I said, oh, the monster only attacks in the dark. So you can literally close your eyes and let the sound design take over. And I kind of described all the craziness. And then you start to really write for the medium. So I said, all right, have them go into a terrarium that's full of birds that attack, that are possessed by this, in the dark, of course.
That's creepy, yeah.
It was very creepy. But it's also funny. It's a really funny story. Because I do like dark comedy. So when the birds attack, you hear all this, you hear all this stuff going on. And that's the way to, I think, kind of write for the audio medium. It's just to remember, this is ears first. Same thing when you're writing movies and television, it's visuals first. Maybe you want to dial back on some of the dialogue. Maybe it's not Aaron Sorkin, The West Wing today, even though I love me some West Wing. I love me some Sorkin.
We're trying to get through everything. So we also did animation on Ben 10 Omniverse. Could you talk to us about the difference in, because you've gotten a number of television gigs, but what was the difference in getting a gig working in animation?
I've never done animation before. I've done a couple of dual masters for Cartoon Network, but that was mainly writing scripts for dialogue replacement. So the Japanese animation was already done, so I was writing Americanized jokes on top of it. This was truly kind of, and it was a great franchise that I was familiar with. And I met with Charlotte McDuffie.
Love Charlotte.
We all love Charlotte, Dwayne McDuffie's wife, and I'd known Dwayne and Charlotte.
And she made Troops.
Yeah, she made Troops. Well, I'd known them back since they'd made Troops, like 10, 20, 15 years ago. We all used to kind of hang out. And it was one of those things where she needed a very experienced writer to come in really fast, write 2 scripts, and just, we gotta get it right. I'm like, hey, follow me, that's great. I'm not modest, sorry. So I came in, and what was great about animation, which is different from television, there are no budgetary restrictions. And I mean, there's budgetary restrictions on the animation, but not on the ideas or the stories. So I literally, in my first Ben 10 episode 71, from Hidorian to Eternity, I wrote a Dark Shadows parody. And they let me get away with it. I can't believe it. Literally, the villain of the story is named Collins. He lives in Collins' house, just like on Dark Shadows. He looks exactly like Barnabas Collins and Jonathan Frid. It's the funniest thing ever. And that's just where the story started. And there's bats and there's crazy. There was just no limits. So it was very liberating as a fantasy sci-fi writer to write that kind of crazy stuff. Same thing with the second one. They just let you cut loose. And then once you're done, it's a very quick process. You're probably done in 3-4 weeks from pitching the idea to finish script. Then you go away, and it takes them 9 months to a year to animate it. and then you just watch it like a normal viewer. It's just the best thing.
So you don't have any direct collaboration with the other people in the process?
No. It's very much Charlotte and all the people that she was working with have been doing Ben 10 at that point for what, 10 years, 8 years. So they had the system down. They need stories. It's like a factory. When you're a professional writer, you want to be able to come in, pitch something with confidence, get it. But once you get it, work with the other producers in the room to kind of shape their vision with yours, find that collaborative medium, kind of happy medium, and then write like the wind. Gunslinger. I love it. Exactly.
All right. Let's see. We have a couple of minutes for questions, because I know we got another panel we're going to get to.
Yes.
We have a couple of minutes for questions. You've written, apparently, based on this panel, almost everything. We have a question really up front. Yes. I'll come out.
So I have like 300 flash-loaded questions for you, and I think I've missed that part of it.
Fair enough.
But I really loved the episodes you've written so far, this season on the Flash, and I'm very much looking forward to next week's, because Iris is my favorite character.
Thank you. Flash time.
Yeah. So I just wanted to know what your role as co-executive producer entails, and then like how much of the ideas come from you, like how much do you get from the episode?
That's a great question. The question was, what do I do as a co-executive producer, and how are ideas generated? What is my actual kind of process? What do I do? One of my jobs as more of a senior writer, as co-EP, is to lead the room and guide the discussions and work with all the younger, less experienced writers, and to listen and to see what comes out, find the nugget, right? Pull it out, and then now help develop it into a real workable, producible story idea, because we do have budget concerns. So a lot of my time is spent working with the younger writers in the room and the medium level writers, just breaking the story. And then once we get a nugget, it's going to the board and actually doing the work and doing it fast, And then once we've got that, if you have more than 2 weeks to break a story, you must have a lot more money than we do. That must be Game of Thrones. You got to do it fast, from the idea on a Monday. By the end of 2 weeks, that story needs to be off the board and done so we can move on. I'll do that. I'll also work in post, looking at cuts, looking at the edits, making suggestions, or if it's my own particular episode, then I'll fly up to set. Then you're on set observing, working with the director, working with the actors, kind of making sure the tone is maintained from the script to the screen. So many other things too. A lot of writing. There's always a script on my desk that either I'm writing, or sometimes as a senior level writer, you will be asked to do help jobs. Like someone needs a help with a scene, and I'll come and I'll write it, because I can do it fast. So that's a day for me. Okay, cool. Can I answer your question? Okay, good.
More questions? Yes, sir. I can't reach you with the mic, but just try to speak loud.
Alright, well, as a comic book creator, I've learned that I actually want to make my comic book into an actual film. And I started to look at comic movies saying adapted by. So what exactly does it mean by an adaptation? Is it like straight from the comic, or do they just...
Yeah, that's a great question. So this gentleman's a comic book creator, so he's asking, what does an adapted by credit mean when it says like Black Panther, blah, 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 but then it's adapted or taken from, I forgot the two guys. Basically, for you as an original creator, you do your comic book, you write it, you publish it, you get it out, and it's down here. When it gets bought by Warner Brothers or Disney or another large company, they can't take away your full creative rights because you own it, okay? So they have to adapt your work. That's what's so great about being a comic book creator. So Disney comes to you and says, Captain Underpants or Black Panther or whoever it is, we're going to essentially license your character for this much money. We have to give you credit for it, and now we're going to adapt it into a movie, and they probably have to make you a producer on the film because you're the creator. You're where it's all started. So when you see that adapted by credit, that means the people who wrote the movie didn't create the work originally. That means you or another creator did. It's very important, and they didn't used to do that in the old days. A lot of people like Jerry Siegel and Joel Shuster, the Superman creators, there was times when they would adapt their work, they wouldn't get any credit. Or Bob Kane and Bill Finger, thank you. That's why I love you. Bill Finger they wouldn't get credit for the work that they had done on Batman. Like you watch Tim Burton, 1989 Batman, I think only Bob Kane.
You will not see
Bill Finger's name on it. That's wrong. That man co-created Batman and worked his behind off for a character we all now love. So that's what adaptation means. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly.
Good.
Very great. Any other questions for the lovely Eric Wallace? All right, let's hit one more. Let's see what we got.
Okay, so what if you made it by yourself? Because I also make my own films, and I started to study how can I actually make it the way how I want to. So exactly what do I have to go through in order to make the film? As in stunt coordinating, locations.
Since I'll answer this question easily. Believe it or not, you're the writer and director, probably the creator of the film. You need a producer. That's what you need to take your mind off all that. You can't find the stunt coordinator. You're too busy thinking about the creative process of working with a storyboard artist and how am I going to translate this cool action sequence visually, because I only got 3 weeks to shoot it because I'm working on a low budget. Your challenge would be to go to PGA, Producers Guild of America, which is what I always suggest. I'm a member, and what they do is they specialize in matching people like yourself, writer, director, creators who have a script and want to make a film with a producer that then knows how to do all the nuts and bolts. Again, it's all about collaboration. No one succeeds alone, myself included. I've had so many good mentors in my life, people who inspired me, that I come to these kinds of panels, listen to those folks, ask my question. You're just me, dude, 20 years ago. That's what I love.
We're expecting you to be set off for the
next circle of life, bro. It'll be your turn in 20 years. That help? Yeah.
All right, yes, sir.
I just wanted to say that when I was a kid growing up, my grandma and I would watch One Life to Live, General Hospital, the half hours, and then Dark Shadows would come on.
Yes.
And she would watch it with me.
Dark Shadows fan in the house.
I called up Jerry Lewis Telethon to speak to Jonathan Freed to give money when I was just a little bigger than him.
That's the best.
So the guy in front, he's good.
Also, the guy in front is not only a Dark Shadows fan, but look at that cool Marvel tie. Come on. Look at that tie.
He'll be on our next panel versus. That's James Thompson.
Is this your son? Oh, and he's passing. See, this is what I like. I take my daughter out. It's passing it on. You guys watch things together. And see, that's what makes it worth it. That's why we're doing this.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm not eternal. I'm not immortal. The work is. That's why it's important to work as hard as you can, but have fun. Gotta have fun. Don't kill yourself, because it is just work. Balance in life and give to the next generation.
Fantastic. So in addition to being able to see your work next Tuesday, at what time?
Tuesdays, 8 o'clock on the CW.
The Flash. His episode, Run Irish Run, is this Tuesday. They can also find me online at eWrote on Twitter and Instagram.
Correct.
Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. Eric Wallace.
Thanks, guys. Great to see everybody today.